to the Reagan administration and campaign from 1979 on. So not only does Bernanke offer no plausible evidence that it's even possible for us to actually truly recover, we can understand how implausible this is by simply imagining how, relative to a fairly consistent circulation, debt increases at an ever-escalating rate. In the beginning, just the principal equals the entire circulation, but the principal and interest is the true obligation, the true debt that we are obligated to pay. And this increases in proportion to the circulation at an ever-escalating rate. And the end of the lifespan of such a system, if you have ever run my computer models that I provided the Reagan administration, or the Excel spreadsheets which perform the basic same processes, you see that in the end of the lifespan, the debt is increasing at just phenomenal rates, which is why all this further public debt is being accumulated merely to maintain a vital circulation. So all this was explained to Reagan. It was explained that, in fact, they would have to adopt mathematically perfected economy immediately to avoid accumulating far more federal debt than any president had before him. And of course all these projections came true, because they can only come true as a consequence of this obfuscation of the currency. What of course is even more preposterous about this facade that our very exploiters are more hopeful of a recovery for which they provide no evidence whatsoever, is the further fact that you see across the news that as soon as it occurs, they will arrest what they call overheated growth by raising interest rates. Bernanke has already hinted to his cohorts in the industry that they're ready to increase interest rates when they see this growth. And you will see it. And what will happen is that this purported growth that we, the stupid people, were hoping to benefit from, to prosper by, will be siphoned away from us in the extra interest rates that we were paying. And this will be done too under a further lie that we benefit from this by arresting price inflation. As my work proved over 40 years ago, no, on the contrary, interest is the cause of price inflation because it perpetually multiplies artificial indebtedness in proportion to a circulation, thus leaving ever less of the circulation to sustain the industry which is obligated to service the debt, and yet forcing from this less circulation which is available to industry in its markets, forcing industry to increase its prices to maintain margins of solubility above the cost of the escalating cost of servicing this ever escalating sum of artificial debt. So interest is the only systemic cause of price inflation. So what they're doing actually when they claim that they're benefiting us by raising interest rates to fight price inflation is they're actually by increasing what they take from us further, they're so much more limiting what the market has to spend that the market can't afford the higher prices. Industry can't charge the higher prices for its production, or it will suffer a decline in market. So what's the consequence of all this is simple. The math is that pretending to benefit us by saving us, purportedly saving us from something they cause, they increase the cost of servicing debt by increasing interest so much that instead of industry reaping what virtually nothing but an ability to maintain margins of solubility by preventing industry from maintaining these margins, necessary margins of solubility. They compromise industry on the one hand, and on the other hand, well, you think you might be better off by not having to suffer price inflation. What in fact is happening is they're transferring the costs of price inflation over to their ledger sheet, taking it as further unearned profit from you. So you, as a market, realize no benefit whatsoever either. In the end, then, of this perpetual pattern of lie, what happens is there is no real hope of recovery. Should we tread just a wee bit to the positive side of the line of terminal failure, all benefits are negated by increasing interest rates, all under a perpetual handful of simple, readily invalidated lies that we are somehow benefiting by these purported bankers obfuscating our own promissory obligations to each other, and without ever giving up lawful consideration, thus laundering the principal into their possession and perpetually multiplying the resultant obligation to pay principal and interest by interest until we suffer a terminal sum of debt and they are left the only options of artificially sustaining the system by perpetually publishing further evidences of the people's, what should be the people's debts to each other as opposed to a banking system, and buying these government bonds and accumulating more federal debt than ever existed before, which we hope to pass criminally onto our own progeny, who of course will be further disadvantaged to survive this debt than even we are. So by our own stupidity of tolerating these lies and not challenging them and not seeing through them, not recognizing what is their solution, we are promoting our own end, and not only the end of our own generations, but every generation beyond us is subject to these lies. Thus, as a further obvious consequence of this, we see, like for instance, a Bloomberg Business Week article, how a federal shutdown could affect Americans. And of course, we're all aware that the federal government is it's limited what it could borrow, but it can perpetually raises this ceiling because, as we would understand from my thesis of inevitable failure, it can only maintain a vital circulation by perpetually reborrowing principal and interest as an ever greater sum of debt. This is exactly what is happening when, the Fed pretends to bail out the government by buying further government bonds. It's really just creating further debt because of the inability of the private sector to borrow further, further compromising itself beyond an already terminal state. So the only available means left within a system which is inherently terminal here is to continually pour money into circulation. And that's all that's happening. We can't service this debt. It's only increasing a debt above a sum of debt which we already couldn't even afford to service. So it grows at an ever-escalating rate because it grows at an inherently ever-escalating rate. But now, since we're not servicing it, even though the sum of debt is increasing, the rate that increases doesn't level out, but it becomes more linear in a dramatic upward fashion as we've seen over the past few presidential terms, because we're really having to borrow back into circulation what's necessary to maintain it from the last debt that we could service. So it becomes the final stages of the lifespan of this live economy become a more linear, very steep upward escalation of artificial indebtedness until eventually sectors which cannot be sustained by the means of pouring the money into circulation eventually fail, so compromising related sectors that the whole thing comes down like the proverbial house of cards. Nonetheless, even if it could be sustained throughout these already terminal stages, this is not at all to our benefit, because all it does is perpetually suspend us in a terminal marginal condition, which is far diminished from the prosperity that we are capable of and would realize under mathematically perfected economy. So it's not really that these lies of economy which have been imposed upon the entire world are terminal, which compels us to resolve the injustices they impose upon us. It's necessary for us to implement solution merely to maintain the prosperity that we are otherwise capable of, and in general this would make us approximately 12 times as solvent to adopt mathematically perfected economy simply by refinancing all purported debts under mathematically perfected economy, which is to count all prior payments of interest instead toward principal, which itself would resolve almost all of the world's present debt, and thereafter paying the remaining principal, if any, at the rate of consumption or depreciation of the related property. So not only can we solve all this immediately simply by eradicating banking and its crimes against us, and restoring to the people the inherent right of every individual to issue their promissory obligation free of exploitation, and to pay that at the rate of consumption or depreciation of the related property, which is mathematically perfected economy. All mathematically perfected economy is the monetary equivalent of barter. It has above barter, of course, the advantage of being a universal medium of exchange, and it has a further advantage of financing all potential prosperity, which of course cannot be achieved if money is spent into circulation on behalf of creating, sustaining a necessarily gargantuan federal government. So there is no other actual solution of all of the categoric faults of any prospective monetary thesis but mathematically perfected economy. It is the only solution, which in each and every case and at every moment solves inflation, deflation, and maladisposition, systemic manipulation of the cost or value of money or property, which you're manipulating constantly if you're purportedly spending money into circulation, which itself is a lie, because as we've shown in previous programs and documents I've written for many years, there's no such thing really as spending money into circulation, because in order to solve inflation, you have to have a means of paying or an obligation to pay every cent out of circulation, which thus